What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 2 of the Conscious Movement podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Tully O'Connor. He's from Perth, Australia. He's newly, happily, blissfully married, I believe. Um,
hmm
and he's a coach, a speaker, and a facilitator. He does a lot of men's work in supporting them in having more freedom, fulfillment, and personal power in their lives. He's the creator of the Conscious Locker Room, which is a place for men to share and expand in every way possible, and also co-creator of Living in Love with his partner, Caitlin. Welcome, Tully. How you doing, bro?
Thanks for having me, man. I'm doing really well. Excited to be diving in for a chat with you today.
Yeah, man, let's get it.
Mm,
It's like we met on Instagram, remember?
yeah.
How many years ago was that? That was like 3 years, 4 years ago?
Yeah, it would be about that. 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like this sort of mutual kind of vibing between us. And then from there, we kept in touch, and then we became friends, and we saw each other build from there. And it's been really, you know, awesome to see you grow. And it's kind of like humble beginnings. And now the connection has built and grown deeper since then.
Yeah, very much so. And it's just one of those things I love about social media. I mean, for all of its downfall, and it gets a bad rap sometimes, but I've connected with some incredible people and have built some incredible friendships purely because of social media. And I think it's, with great power comes great responsibility. And if you use that power for good, then good stuff can happen. And it's funny, like we would have had a conversation a handful of times. And then other than that, it's just staying in touch. And we've built, what I consider a really great friendship. And it's kind of crazy to think we haven't actually met in person yet.
Right? Right? It's like, it really is. It's like, and I think that's the power of the internet that we have these days, where connections can be made anywhere. And um, for sure, like it can be used in such a powerful way, and also can you be used as a disservice as well if it's not used
Mm.
wisely. So I'm glad we used it wisely, Tully.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, man, exactly.
So I wanted to start with, like, it's a big question, but there's two things in your life that I see, you're passionate about. And I wanted the story behind, first, like the Conscious Locker Room, why you decided to create that, and like the manifestation of that, and also Living in Love. What was the need for something like that to be built by you and your partner?
Where do we want to start? I guess, well, what came first? Living in Love actually came first before the Conscious Locker Room. And Living in Love came to be, I guess, it just came to be out of just inspiration. My now wife, we weren't even engaged at the time. We got engaged just as we were sort of launching Living in Love. And that's basically a space for couples and singles, but for people to explore conscious relationship in the modern world, but in a down to earth way, without getting too lost in the esoteric um, nature of it all. So uh, we basically, I went and explored Tantra for, I guess, well, starting at the beginning. Yeah, so I went and explored Tantra, fell into it, went to my first workshop, didn't even know it was a Tantra workshop until I got there. The girl I was seeing at the time was already going, and we were kind of on the rocks. So it was kind of one of those Hail Mary passes. I was just like, sure, I'll go to this thing. It was called The Juicy Life. And yeah, basically that really shifted things for me. I dove really deep into the Tantra world for about 2.5 years, learning a lot about masculine and feminine dynamics, embodying both of those, really tapping into a lot of my emotion, releasing a lot of guilt and shame around sexuality, and exploring that part of my life, which was completely new for me at that point. I was 25 at the time I started exploring all of that. And it changed the game. It changed for the game for me personally, how I showed up as a man within relationship. Because I was always a nice guy, but I lacked a little bit of that, I guess that personal power. Like I didn't really feel confident in relationships. I had a lot of relationships that kind of fizzled out a little bit. And so it completely transformed things for me in a relationship sense and in a business sense, in terms of my confidence and my ability to show up there. And so I was already practicing all of that. And then when I met Caitlin, she kind of came into that world as well. And we explored a lot together in that world. And then the time came where, I don't know if you can relate, but things kind of go through cycles. You know, things come into your life for a reason and a season, and some things come in for a lifetime, but very few things come in for a lifetime. And we kind of wrapped up our season exploring all of that stuff and then stepped out of it, but we still wanted to learn and grow as a couple. And we were kind of drawing on different people for inspiration, but we didn't actually find anyone that sort of had the balance of the depth, yet like sort of the light-heartedness and the play and the normal everyday life stuff as well. It was kind of like either or. And so that's when we're like, well, maybe this is what we're supposed to be bringing to the world. So we just started doing it, man. We just started sharing, just started an Instagram account, just started sharing stuff on Instagram, and it just blew up. It was, it was quite crazy. So yeah, that's where the inspiration for Living in Love came from.
And I just want to ask, like, if, you know, before doing the work through Tantra and, you know, working through intimacy and the other things that you do in Tantra, do you feel that really supported you in calling in Caitlin into your life?
Hugely. Yeah. Like, short answer to that question is yes. I can see, looking back, I could see the patterns of the relationships I attracted. And it's not like any of them were bad or toxic or anything like that, but it was a pattern where eventually the wounded self or the insecurities would play out. And so it was almost like I was looking for the relationship to fill a hole, and I would attract. I wasn't valuing myself. I wasn't seeing my strength. So therefore I wasn't showing up with that confidence. Therefore I wasn't attracting somebody that would mirror that for me. So a lot of that deeper work allowed me to not only understand it, because I think there's a lot of personal development where at a head level, it's like, oh yeah, I love myself. Oh yeah, I'm worthy. I'm abundant. Like, awesome. And nothing changes. And so what that deeper, it allows you to actually physically shift on a cellular level. So I had experiences where I actually felt it. I'm like, oh wow. And then I was just operating from a knowingness of self-worth and self-love. And I love my own company that much that I was genuinely not a bypassing. If I don't find anybody, I'll still be happy. I was just literally so happy with myself living my life that, yeah, you just become a magnet.
Yeah, man, there's like 3 super powerful points in what you just said. You know, the knowingness, the experiential work is for me the most important work. You know, actually knowing these beliefs and, you know, in a inside your body, compared to a lot of personal development where you just affirm, and you're kind of like trying to force this thing for you to feel this thing, but you're not actually feeling it deep down. And I think going to workshops or going to places where you get to experience something different, that can make big transformations in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then you spoke about like bypassing, right? Because, you know, these people that are like, I love myself so much, and then they just sit on their own like all day, every day, and they just saying, I love myself. This is because I love myself. And they're just really, they're hiding out in a way. And that's not true self-love, because true self-love for me is when you can get messy and love yourself at the same time. And some people just avoid the messy things. And that's why, you know, one of the things you say is that relationship is the ultimate invitation to growth, because you're kind of always getting stuck in and kind of like really loving yourself through all these triggers, through all these patterns that are emerging through being in resonance with someone else.
Yeah. Well, and nobody knows you as deeply as your intimate partner. That we can put on a front for the world. And even if we're not trying to, we just naturally do, because that's what we've done to survive in social settings, in our family dynamic. We learn what to do to receive love and feel safe. And more often than not, it's not be our true self. Whereas in an intimate relationship, that person gets to know you and see you more than anybody else. And that brings stuff up for us. And so that's why I feel it's such an amazing ground for personal growth and exploration, because there's no hiding. In a really intimate relationship, I mean, you can be in relationship and hide and shut down, but in a conscious, open, like not an open relationship, but like where there's open communication and all of that, like that, it triggers the little wounds that we've managed to avoid looking at our whole lives. You can't go deep with somebody and still avoid looking at that stuff. You just can't. So it gets brought to the surface. So knowing how to deal with that, I feel is really important.
Yeah, and like I played that story, you know, where I saw relationship as kind of the antithesis to growth. Like being independent and on my own and like traveling and all these things were, you know, like seemed like the most important thing to finding myself and to really understand that self-love. And it was really important on my journey. But as I went through it, I understood that I was avoiding some of the wounds that I had towards intimacy and the deeper things that where I wasn't letting myself be seen, where being on my own was a safe place to hang out. And it wasn't the edge which I needed to push in to actually really get to a place where I love myself. And that's when relationship came into play in a bigger way in my life, where I started to realize how powerful being in a relationship with someone, a conscious person, can actually be. And it really is something that can literally change everything.
Very much so, man. And I just couldn't agree more. And a lot of people ask, and one of the most common messages we get from people through sort of living in love is, you know, is it better to do the work before you get into a relationship with somebody, or can you do the work together? And there's no right answer for that. But what I will say is, yes, if you're on your own, definitely work on yourself and learn stuff and learn more about yourself, learn more about what you actually want. But you can do all the theoretical work that you want until you're actually doing some either embodiment work in workshops and that sort of thing. It's still, when the relationship shows up, that's when the work will begin all over again. Because, you know, you can't really trigger yourself. So anyway, it's much easier to get in flow and get in the vortex and just crush life when you're on your own. But when that person shows up and just points out these things that you thought you'd worked on and you thought you'd nailed, like that's when it gets fun. So it's definitely, you know, you can do a lot of growth on your own. But I find I haven't met anybody who's like, oh yeah, I did all this work on my own and then I got into a relationship and then I didn't have to do any more work because I did it all before I got into the relationship. That doesn't exist. Well, I'm yet to come across the person where that's been a reality.
I don't think that does exist, because that's sort of training ground. But when it actually happens, when shit actually hits the fan, that's a completely different ballgame in every single area of your life. It's like, well, here it is. So what are you going to do now? What are you choosing right now? And then the alarm bells are coming off as well at the same time, whilst you have to do the thing that you need to do or you should do, instead of having the safer container of a workshop or whatever, an experiential program. It's how can you show up in the moments that show who you actually are.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the hardest part. Like, so many of us aren't living in the moment. And especially as guys, we spend a lot of time in our head, like disconnected from our body, disconnected from our emotions. And the feminine, if we're in a heterosexual relationship, so the feminine in our female partner, but the feminine in general, like, they can feel that. They might not even be conscious of the fact, but if we're in our head and not actually present in our bodies with them, they can feel it. And they'll do whatever they can to get that connection. And if that means picking an argument, if that means, doing something so that they can then feel us. Even if that feeling us is frustration, it's still feeling us. And they're like, okay, you're there. I can feel you now. So a lot of the work for me was getting into my body in a proactive way. So I'm present and actually there and can be felt. So it doesn't have to happen in a provocative way, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure, man. I think that was such an important perspective for people to hear, because I think as men, sometimes we start blaming and being like, why are they acting like this? What are they doing, right? And like we get frustrated because we don't. Some part of us doesn't understand what they're doing, because, as you said, we're more in our heads and they're more in their bodies, like naturally. So
Typically, yeah.
yeah, typically, yeah. So that is really important to have a different perspective of what are their actually needs in that moment. Why are they doing what they're doing?
Because often the issue is never the issue, or the issue is rarely the issue. So it might be like the words are saying this, but what's not being said? It's just that maybe she misses you and she wants to feel you, and you've been distracted or you've been absent. So it might be like it's listening to what's not being said and having your spidey senses really turned on and feel into what's actually happening. And feel, and when you start to practice this, you can feel that your partner's stressed or a bit wound up, so that when she might snap or she might say something, it doesn't land or trigger you, because you've got the awareness that she's in that state. And it's like, more often than not, the words expressed are just a reflection of how they're feeling in that moment. And there's not necessarily a lot of capital T truth to them. So it's just expanding our ability to feel our own body and get in our own body, know what we're feeling, because then that gives us a better chance at perceiving what they're feeling. And I ask this question because whenever I'm running workshops or coaching guys or whatever, I'll share that, and they'll have some idea of what I'm talking about. And then I'll say, have you ever gotten home and walked in the door and you haven't seen your partner yet, but just something in the house feels tense? It feels like you're walking into something. You can feel your spidey senses are just tingling. That's that thing. So it's developing and deepening that thing. So when you might be in some conflict or in a disagreement or something, and you can bring yourself out of it and feel them and operate from that space, rather than just this verbal dialogue that's back and forth and goes nowhere.
I think a lot of men can relate to that point, and that's it's important for them to know that how to actually deal with that, and how they can actually deal with those situations better. And you spoke about like nice guy syndrome. You said you were like you weren't, I guess, in your full power at times, and you said you were too nice in relationships, and that kind of caused issues between you and the feminine. Could you expand on that and maybe go into like how you actually dealt with coming out of nice guy syndrome? Because I think a lot of men have this issue, especially in the culture that has created a culture where maybe being more masculine can be perceived as negative. We kind of can reject that area of ourselves. And also, if we grew up with a more, a mother that might have rejected that side of the masculine, she would have maybe put those beliefs onto yourself, and then you've in turn stopped activating those parts of you. How could you just enlighten the audience on how you dealt with that?
Yeah, for sure. I was a chronic people pleaser and sufferer of nice guy syndrome. And it's a chronic condition. It really is. And it has its effects slowly over time. And if you're a people pleaser, if you struggle saying no, if you're not good at setting boundaries, if you're not good at respecting your own time, if you support other people before you support yourself, if you procrastinate on your own goals, but then you'll be there and you'll support other people. All of these things are just symptoms of what I call like nice guy syndrome. And it's basically valuing other people's agendas above our own. Because somewhere along the line, we learned that to receive love and to feel safe, we need to make sure everybody else is taken care of. And so we become more aware of what's going on around us and more disconnected from what's going on inside of us. And we try to tiptoe around things and make sure everybody's happy and everybody's okay, and then we'll feel okay. And so that's one part of it. And the other part of it, like you say, deeper, there's a rejection of our own masculine power. And like you said, and it's talking about masculine and feminine in terms of energies, not man and woman, because I think it's important to make that distinction, because we can, when we're growing up, we can attach certain things to being a man. And that might look like, if our early experience of men is that men are aggressive and aggression is bad, or men in power do bad things, and it can be subtle things. It might be an older kid at school. It might be, you might have had an experience where your dad was stressed out and, threw something across the room, or it might have been a lot worse than that, or it might have been slightly more subtle than that. Even the subtle things we will make meaning of, especially if like you say, there's extra input confirming that from people around us, from our mother, from those sorts of things, because we look at the aggressive behavior and then we make meaning that that's bad because you felt scared when it happened, and then your mum said that it's bad. So then that aspect of me as a man, as a boy, because I'm like dad, that shouldn't be here. That's not okay. And so we just deny that aspect exists of ourselves, and we'll just suppress it and cut it off. And you see this all the time though, because as soon as somebody gets drunk or goes loses their conscious faculty, that's when aggression comes out. So there's a huge cultural issue in Australia of binge drinking and young people binge drinking, fights, all of that kind of stuff, because consciously we're suppressing all of this stuff, but it's got to come out somewhere. So getting, I guess, back to that point about the nice guy syndrome is all of those parts of myself that I disowned, the part that got angry, the part that was powerful, the part that could manipulate, the shadow self, I disowned that. And I was like, no, I don't get angry. I'm just nice guy Tal. I'm here to make everybody happy. I'm everybody's friend. Everybody loves me. And there was part of me that was a manipulative jerk, but I just kept him on a leash my whole life. And so actually going in, acknowledging that he was there, and feeling what it felt like to experience rage, to experience anger, to experience all of these things, and knowing that I can feel that and not hurt anybody. I can feel that and not throw something across the room. It's like, this energy in itself isn't a bad thing. It's what's done with that energy. So we look at, people having aggressive outbursts and we think that's anger. It's like, that's not anger. That's what's being done with anger. That's aggression. That's suppressed anger that's coming out and being used in a toxic way. So when you can actually go in and access these parts of yourself that you've suppressed, or when I went in and accessed those parts of myself that I suppressed, it completely transformed my life, because anger actually is there to let us know that a boundary has been crossed. Anger allowed, if somebody walks into my house and threatens my wife, I'm probably going to get pretty angry about it, and I'm probably going to do something about it. That energy is very beneficial when it's required. And it's that's a physical boundary being crossed. But, and I'm sure you can relate, if little boundaries get crossed, if you catch up with somebody and you really didn't want to, and then you didn't get that thing done that you needed to, and you get frustrated. So every time little boundaries get crossed, we're just suppressing and storing that anger. So when we can access that, we no longer let those boundaries get crossed. And for me, that happens so much in relationship, because I would always put my partner first. Whereas this allowed me to be actually, no, this is what I need. That's not okay. You can deal with that on your own, because I'm going to go and deal with this. And that just changed the game for me completely.
I can completely relate to that story completely in terms of rejecting those sides of me and playing the nice guy role, but feeling something was off. Something was just off. I was just like,
Mm,
I don't feel right as a man. I don't know. Something's just not correct. I just don't feel like I'm being authentic. I don't feel like, I'm really having the power that I should have as a man in my life. And I was like, what's the issue here? I'm being nice, right? I'm having, I'm the society tells me this is all these things are the good things and all those things are the bad things.
mm,
Right? So I should go towards all these good things, right? These things that people are telling me. And then I was like, but I can't feel much. And when I get angry, I
mm,
just reject it. And I'm lowering my emotional bandwidth, right? So
mm.
as you shut down your anger, you shut down your joy, right? You shut down everything else. And I was just shutting down all
You
these
can't
things.
selectively suppress.
Yeah.
So it all goes.
Yeah, right. And I wish I knew this, like what we're speaking about now, like way early in my journey, because then I would have just started feeling into my emotions and started to understand that I don't have to act on those emotions, but they're resources to use to know when something is not right, right? It's
Mm,
like, again, what you said, like when our boundaries are being crossed, when we did something that we shouldn't have done, that wasn't in alignment with us, our emotions can signal to us what isn't in alignment, right? And if we shut those off, then we become more in our heads, right? We become all these logical, walking heads, right? We just start
yeah.
pros and cons. Everything's a pro and a con. Everything's a pro and a con. So, and then we feel more out of alignment, and we're like, what? Then we feel even more empty, and
Yeah.
it's a vicious cycle. So, I think men need to really understand that all their emotions are valid. It's just how we
Hmm.
act on them is the part of it, because that energy can be used and to understand ourselves better.
Mm. And feelings are just feedback. Like you said, it's just like a guidance system, your emotional guidance system. And every emotion is there to give us feedback on something. And just we live in a society where emotions are bad. Even joy is suppressed. Like, who are you to feel so good? Do you know what I mean? In Australia, tall poppy syndrome is a massive thing. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but if you're making something of yourself or you're celebrating yourself, you're cocky and you're full of it. Do you know what I mean? So even joy, even that feeling is suppressed. It's all suppressed. And when we can learn more about what each emotion is there to, I guess, signal to us, then we can start to make sense of it all. And yeah, and that's step one. That's what I usually take guys through is developing more of that emotional agility. So just because you can experience anger doesn't mean you need to live in anger and be an angry person. Like, I'm still a nice guy. I'm just not a nice guy who doesn't have the ability to draw a line in the sand when needed. Do you know what I mean? It's just equipping ourselves with the ability to go left or go right. Whereas if we don't, if we're just rigid, we're just stuck where we are. And in relationship especially, it's just not going to fly. If you're in a relationship with a conscious woman, it's just not going to fly. It's they're wanting us to provide, but it's not so much. The world has shifted in that it's no longer that role mate set up in relationship where men have their role. And I'm talking about heterosexual relationships. That's been my experience. So that's what I'm going to speak into now. But that the man does this, the woman does this. It's, the women, had periods in our relationship where Kat has out-earned me. Do you know what I mean? So we're not needed to go out and provide a roof over our head and food on the table necessarily anymore. But what are we there to provide? And it's safety, but more so in an emotional and a spiritual sense. Like, can we provide safety for us and her to explore those parts of ourselves? That's what's required. And we're not even close to given a user manual for any of this stuff as guys. And yeah, I just went and figured it all out for myself through personal pain. Really, I just always had a high value of relationship, and yeah, it was my curiosity and just personal experience that led me to that. And yeah, now it's so important because there's no shortage of guys that are putting their hand up to do the work. That's the thing. Like there's guys everywhere that are just like, show me how, that are wanting to do better, as if anybody wants to be a shit partner. Like that doesn't exist. Maybe that's the mask that they don't care, but there are so many guys out there willing to do the work, and it's just, how can we share this in ways that are actually going to land for guys today?
Absolutely, man. I think that's a great place for men to start, to actually, first shining a light to where the nice guy syndrome comes from. And then that's the place where we can actually start, excavating that. And then we can actually transmute that to somewhere else. And I wanted to shine a light on how words and language are super important, because as you said, like you get called cocky or, aggressive, all these buzzwords, right? Or if you're doing what we're doing, you're called selfish, right? And all,
yeah.
And when I was younger, that all these words were put in my head. It's like, okay, if you do that, you're selfish. If you do that, you're cocky. If you do that, you're aggressive. It's like, well, that's why I'm shutting down all these parts of me, because I'm told that these are not how it should be, and I'm a bad person for being like this. And so I think language, as we're growing up, language in a society really can stunt our development in a lot of places, because we just start rejecting after that.
Definitely. And I think it's because like the events in our life aren't important. It's the meaning that we make of them. And the meaning we make of them is largely determined by the language that we give to them. So it's not the only thing, but it's a massive part as humans. So yeah, the language used to describe a certain behavior or a certain event plays a huge role into the meaning that we make of it, and therefore the meaning we make about us. Especially in those younger years, like 0 to 7, we're very egocentric. We think we're the center of the universe. We think the world revolves around us. So dad's unhappy, it's because of something we did. If that went wrong, it's because of something else, because we're like psychologically, that's how we're operating. So yeah, like words used and things that happen, especially in those younger years, like penetrate the psyche. And unless we're given ways to allow that to evolve, through sort of rites of passage and all of these things, then we'll just stay in that. Like a lot of us, there's a lot of men walking around with the psychology of young boys, and there's a lot of women walking around with the psychology of young girls, because our society isn't set up in a way that allows the natural development of that. It gets stunted. And then we cut ourselves off from our ability to feel. So then we just stay trapped in these events that happened to us 15 years ago. And we're wondering why nothing changes in our life, because we're still operating from the psychology and the physiology of that 9-year-old that's scared of getting teased. No wonder you're not taking action in your business, because there's that 9-year-old inside of you that doesn't want to actually stand out and make any moves, because last time he did that, he got the piss pulled out of him by his mates. So yeah, it's just recognizing that. And then, like you say, language, that's the first way to start reframing all of this, I found, is get into your body, but just watch the words that come out of your mouth when you speak about yourself. And then, where did they come from? Who else said that? Was it mom? Was it dad? Was it a brother? Was it a sister? Was it a friend? Because most of the time, if it's self-deprecating, it's probably not your own. It's probably come from somewhere else. I'm
going to use that one. I love that. Words penetrate your psyche. I think that's a powerful statement. I think they really do. And words are so important in our lives, and language creates our world. So was that one of the motivations behind creating the Conscious Locker Room, which is the online Facebook group for men to share and learn and expand, and you facilitate that through your own sharing too?
Yeah, so that was just a space. Yeah, I didn't feel like there's a lot more now since it started popping up, different men's groups, and I think everyone's got their own flavor. Do you know what I mean? It's not everybody, like we were saying before we sort of started recording, not every event or tool or medicine or course is for everyone. And so I just recognized that I looked around, and what I saw in terms of the men's work that was available, especially like sort of online, there wasn't anything that really like landed for me in all aspects. And so I just decided to create something myself. where I would bring my essence to it, and things I enjoy, like a balanced approach to life, passionate about movement, exploration, going deep within relationship, all of that sort of stuff, talking about money, talking about all of these things, keeping it all on the table. And so, yeah, that was the inspiration for that, to just have a place where men could come. And that was essentially it. And I started, and I could feel I was already reaching out and connected with guys like yourself and some other guys that are doing good things. So yeah, I reached out to a few guys to share, I guess, my vision with it all. And then, it came to life, and it's had its ebbs and flows in terms of the energy in the group, like everything does. But it's a sad thought that there are men out there that feel like they have absolutely no one to go to. So even just having a space where, if they really needed to, they could reach out, I think that's an important thing to have. And nothing beats that 3D in-person connection. But, in this digital world, it's important to have these spaces, because that leads to more often the manifestation of these 3D chances to connect.
And some guys just don't have a place to go in like face to face. They just don't have it. So it's like, well, what's the next best thing is having an online space, which, I'm 100% sure that a lot of guys have really valued having that space that you created, because there probably wasn't anywhere else for them to go to, So, and it's funny because we normally create things that we wish we had, and that's how we create as human beings. A lot of the time, it's like, well, I wish I had a space right like that was like that. So, well, there isn't one, so maybe I should just create it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And one of my biggest mentors early on, one of his things he used to love to say is like, everybody's waiting for someone to go first. So it's just to be that person. So a lot of the things I've done, and some have lasted the test of time until now, some haven't, but it doesn't matter. It's just when you're getting those insights or those ideas and it's not around, there's probably a reason that you're getting that idea and it's not around yet. It's probably because you're supposed to do something with it. So yeah, that's definitely, it was definitely what I needed. Same with living in love. Like what I went through to learn what I learned and to put it in a way that actually made sense to me. It was years and hours and thousands of dollars. And I was like, imagine if we could just shortcut this into the most potent thing. Like, and that's the course I wish I had 5 years ago, So it's very much that. It's like, how can we learn, grow? That's evolution. Do you know what I mean? That's evolution. That's what's happening now, is how much can we learn, grow, distill, and then share to then fast track the journey for those coming alongside us or behind us. And then they do the same. And that's, I don't know, that's what the game's all about, I guess.
Yeah, man. It is. That's how it is, man. And there was a Facebook post you posted recently which really caught my eye. It was something that I had been thinking about recently, and I felt like you just put it in a really good way, and it was an important message. It was post about time under tension, and how growth is actually realized. How do we actually grow? Because I've had experiences where I've done something that would induce growth, but then I've gone and hid away on my social media, right? So I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the growth. So I would put myself out there and then run away from it. And I put myself out there and then I'll just come back to the comfort zone or come back to something that would distract me from feeling it through fully. And, time under tension, I think for you, it means like feeling the uncomfortableness of the growth is one of the most important aspects of growing. So say you're, I don't know, going to do a public speaking event or something uncomfortable, really feeling that and how much you can feel is going to determine like how much you're going to progress as well.
Yeah, definitely. And because transformation requires tension. And like I use the time under tension analogy because I feel like if we can understand something in a physical sense, like that we can touch and hold and look at, and then apply that to other areas of life, so emotional well-being, it just makes it a bit easier. And so, like, quite physically and quite literally, to grow a muscle, it requires time under tension. And there are a million different ways of going about that in terms of, you know, reps and sets and all of that. But basically, time under tension, the more time under tension we have, the more time under more tension, the more adaptation we're going to get in our muscle tissue. And so what I've noticed is that same thing applies to emotional resilience and spiritual resilience and all of these things. And it's just that time under tension, and we're conditioned to recoil from that discomfort, that pain. We're conditioned to lean away from it because we think something bad is going to happen. And one of my other mentors always used to say, you know, pain doesn't equal suffering. It's the resistance to pain that equals suffering. And so can we sit with that discomfort? And the more of that we can do, and it doesn't mean you need to go looking for discomfort and live in discomfort, but when things arise, it's, can you actually be with it? Can you sit in the fire and feel it? You know, when you go through a breakup, can you actually feel that to its fullness? Can you feel the loneliness, the sadness, the despair, all of that stuff? Or do you just go on a bender for a month and get over it, or think you get over it? It's like, then no transformation happens then. Nothing changes. And so it's finding the balance of feeling something to completion and then indulging. Because some people can very much indulge. And so it's just finding that truth within you and having people in your corner that can help you navigate it. Because indulging in something is just as unhealthy as completely bypassing it altogether. And I have seen a lot of that in different communities, of where the pain or the work or the nasty stuff can be a bit glorified. And so people can spend a bit more time there than maybe that they need to, you know? So it's about finding that balance. And you'll know where you're at. Because if you're somebody who struggles to feel anything, chances are you're not indulging in your emotions. If you're somebody that feels everything all of the time, maybe you are. So it's like just seeing what's true for you and being like, okay, how can I develop a bit more harmony in my life?
Yeah, yeah. And you know, the masculine grows through challenge. You know, that's one of the ways that the masculine by nature really gets excited by challenge, and it's really supportive for us. And you know, I am a believer that you should actually go towards discomfort in a in a in a balanced way. I'm not saying being a total anarchist and just go and go, like be like the
Burn it all
Joker.
down.
Yeah, be like the Joker and just like go crazy on the world. But what I mean by that is that as a man, how I felt, and I think many men, I think the masculine can relate to this, is that when we're not challenging ourselves, we don't feel good about ourselves, or as good as we could do about ourselves. We feel like I felt like something is missing. It's like, because hiding out doesn't feel good as a man. If we're really stepping into our power and purpose in this world, there's going to be uncomfortable. And when we do face our challenges, we feel damn good about ourselves. And that's missing in this comfortable world sometimes, because everything's kind of given to us on this silver platter, right? We have food in the fridge, we have a TV, we can sit on the sofa. You know, there's things like porn where we don't have to actually go out and meet people. You know, there's loads of places for us to hide, and that's what's causing a lot of mental issues to manifest as men. And so I think, you know, seeking discomfort at least once a day is a really good practice to say, whatever that might be. It could manifest as a cold shower in the morning. It could be like being the most uncomfortable thing in the morning. It could be saying hello to someone on the street that you wouldn't do normally. It could literally something that makes you feel that tension, right? You were talking about, like,
Exactly.
What's going to make you feel that tension? You need to start pushing into those edges if you really want to make progress in your life in a spiritual and in a physical way.
Yeah, I love it. And the biggest illusion is that we get to avoid the challenge. We're conditioned to try and avoid the challenge with all of life's comforts, and then you're faced with the challenge of depression, or you're faced with the challenge of being 20 kilos overweight. It's like life by nature is challenge. It's just that we're also equipped with everything we need to overcome those challenges. So I think it's DeMartini who says it, Dr. DeMartini, if we don't seek out inspiring challenges, we'll attract uninspiring challenges. So it's this idea of creating security, and it's so deeply conditioned, like create security, safety, so you don't have to experience discomfort in our little boxes. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it creates that suffering because there's so much resistance to the pain or discomfort, interchange those terms. There's so much resistance to it. That resistance to it creates the suffering, not the actual discomfort itself. Like you say, you feel alive after it. Cold shower and anything like that, speaking on stage, and it doesn't stop, because once you become comfortable with that thing that was not comfortable, something new has to happen, because you'll hit a plateau if you just stay there. And the amount of successful people that get depressed and all of that, it's because there's no end point, and unless we're constantly seeking inspiring challenges. And it's also checking in with the place that we're coming from, I think, is important, because I've seen and witnessed and even been that overachiever that was seeking challenges, but I was doing it to impress dad. So it's not just the what you're doing, how you're going about it is really, really important as well. And are you going about it from this place for the sake of, self-improvement, for fulfillment, for all of that? Or are you still trying to impress somebody? And checking in with that as well, because otherwise you can go seek challenges, overcome challenges for 20 years and get to 40 and be no happier, no better off than when you started. So checking in with that place that it's coming from, like where are you moving from? Is it outside yourself, or is it from your center? Is it actually from you and your core values and what you're about, and align with your mission? And answer those questions before you start going for the big stuff. But then it's, like on the daily, get uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I love that DeMartini quote, like, because you are going to face challenges, and so you choose which ones do you want to face, which ones are the ones that, because it's going to happen, like you can't avoid it. And then the second thing you mentioned about how there's so many layers to everything we do, right? It's like it's not black and white, and that's how, becoming more conscious, we realize that everything is there's way more. I don't, some part of me doesn't like to use the word complex, but there is more to it than what is just like an A or B decision. It's like, oh yeah, take challenges or not take challenges. Like, no, but where's the intention coming from? Is it coming from a wound? Is it coming from this? It's like, as we get more conscious, you realize more and more realizations about how everything is this sort of gray area, which it depends on so many different things of whether that's the right action. And then you figure that out for yourself as you discover more and more about who you are. Then you can make better and better decisions. And that's what alignment is.
100%. And it's just like you say, how you were hesitant to use the word complex because you don't want to make things more complex than they need to be. And I think it's a really good point to bring up, because, we are complex beings, but we're also simple beings. And so it's like balancing really being introspective and looking at what's driving us, and then relaxing and going with the flow and setting up systems so we're not overthinking every decision, every meal, every workout. Why am I so it's the balance between having awareness and reflecting, and not overcooking it and doing your head in of over. And because I see that happen. Well, is it this? Is it this? Am I sabotaging? Is it from this? Is that my mother wound? Is that? And you can just overwhelm yourself into just being anxious and miss the whole point completely. So it's that balance. It's that have awareness without overcooking it.
That's so important. That's such an important catch right there, because you can get into that of like over analyzing every single thing, or just
Yeah.
what's the meaning behind this? It's like, no, relax, live life,
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
present.
Yeah. And one of my, a guy that I did some training with, he's a really, really good speaker. And he was making a joke along those lines and then just sort of mocking a little bit like everything's a sign. And his point I thought was quite good. And his point is that like the universe doesn't work in necessarily one-offs. And yes, we can have synchronicities, and I do believe in that, but it works more consistently in patterns. So if a bird shits on your shoulder, doesn't mean anything. We could make it mean something. We could say, oh, it's good luck, or oh, it's bad luck. But really a bird just shat on your shoulder. That's what just happened. And then we get to make the meaning of it. But it's so, don't over analyze one-off events, but look for patterns. Look for recurring patterns in life. Oh, well, I consistently feel this way after I do this. Or I'm anxious after I hang out with this person. Or reflect on how you've showed up in work situations, or reflect on relationships you've attracted, and spend time reflecting on patterns rather than overcooking and overthinking one-off incidences has served me well, because I've definitely been guilty of just overanalyzing things before.
For sure, man. And I wanted to ask, what challenges are you facing right now, Tully?
Oh, good question. Right now, my biggest one would be almost coming back into my own, in terms of me and Kat were doing a lot of work together. We just launched an online business together that's sort of around affiliate marketing and that sort of stuff. And then we do our living in love work together. And we've kind of had this realization, getting married shook a lot up for us and really forced us into a new level of alignment. And I'm 30, Kat's 22. And so what we've realized is I'm ready to work and to build my castle, build my kingdom. And I can work. I can wake up early. If I'm inspired and aligned, then I have no issue working hard. Whereas she's not in a position in her life where she's wanting to put in that same kind of effort and have that same kind of drive. Yet we kind of linked all of our wagons together across all of our work spectrums. So the biggest challenge I've been facing recently is letting go of the attachment to how things were going to look in terms of the quote unquote power couple doing everything together, and coming back into my own and being like, what's real for me in my own right now. And then we're still going to work together. We're still going to do all of that stuff, but that's not where I'm going to put the rocket fuel. I've sort of had to realign and get clarity around my own stuff. And that's where I'm going to put my rocket fuel. So that's been the biggest thing that I've been navigating recently. And yeah, that's sort of just come out of that transition. And so now the biggest challenge is execute, is letting go of old patterns of overwhelm, or any excuses or those sorts of things, and just starting to consistently execute and take the action.
That's so important, man. I think sometimes we get caught up in ideas, right? And then we lose touch of what's actually happening. And this power couple thing, right? It's like, it is a thing, right? I think it is a
It's
thing.
a thing. It's a thing, dude.
In the conscious, community, or in general, it's becoming a thing, right? It's like, it's kind of like people are like, we need to be in a couple to do anything. In some ways, in some things, like that's the highest way to do it. That's a really must be. If I'm in a partnership, it must be like this, right?
Man, yes.
I felt that, I felt that, like it's like, oh yeah, I need to find this, because then I can have this idea of this power couple, and then everyone will see me in this certain way, and we'll be crushing it, and like, hurrah, like, and then everything is great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just like can't wait to throw down that hashtag. Just
like, right?
And it's just it's it's a problem. Like we get a lot of questions of, because it makes us want our partner to be something that they're not. And I'll put my hand up, like I had attachment, because I'm human. We're all like, I had attachment to things And it wasn't so much looking a certain way necessarily for social media, or I'm sure that does play into it somewhere, but it was more, I had an idea of how things were going to go. And then when it didn't go that way, it was like, oh, wow. So it's just it was an invitation to let go of attachment and to let go of rigidity and let things flow, because who knows what's going to happen 6 months from now, 9 months from now. But it was good because it's forced me to come back to my center. And I feel like, especially in a conscious monogamous relationship, if you are working together, it's very easy to go codependent. And so to actually come back and have time and have opportunity to come back to your center individually, that is really important part of the process. So it's been a gift, and it's felt like truth, but it's just been interesting to observe my attachments to different things.
That's like, it's so landing for me, because it's such a good reminder for me, letting go of rigidity and letting things happen as they are happening, because that might happen later and that might actually happen in that way, but there's a deeper like resource of wisdom, and once we allow that to happen without our ideas, we can really be free, and it feels so much lighter than carrying these ideas that must happen, rather than allowing things to happen.
And it's like that power versus force. I don't know if you've read that book, but yeah, it talks about that.
Is that Tomasi? Is that?
No, I think Hawken.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Oh, I forget actually. I'll find it for you. I'll send it through.
Okay.
Because it's really, it just that, too much intention and is trying to control, and too much surrender is just sort of being lazy. Do you know what I mean? So again, it's having both, having them coexist, and finding the balance. That's what it's all about. And I can definitely over-intend, and opening up to that surrender has been where my work's at. For some people, living with more intention is where, so it's, again, there's no right or wrong, and depending on where you're at, but definitely opening up to that surrender of, because that control and that overemphasis on intention can be just a way to stay safe. Especially if you're an intelligent guy, you can manipulate and try to control your environment and your outcomes so you know what's happening. And it's just a way to stay safe. Whereas if you surrender and open up a little bit more, it's, and especially now, I don't know, with the rate at which things can manifest and build with social media, with low startup costs for things, it's like stuff can happen so fast and change so fast. So opening up to that, but being clear enough on your values and your mission that you're not getting swayed by everything that comes along as well.
Yeah, and exactly. Once again, like, everyone's got a different edge to push through, and it depends on where you're at and what's happening in your current present moment. And I just want to touch upon the fact that I think, as men, and as someone that predominantly resides in my more masculine, surrendering has been difficult for me. So that's my edge, has been surrendering, because I'm good at planning and structure and saying intentions. Give me a good plan and I'm happy. Tell me the how, and like, what am I doing? But surrendering and just allowing things to happen, and jumping in the unknown, and not pushing so much attention and not forcing. That's been my edge recently. My edge has been surrender and tapping into more of my feminine energy at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that in a massive way. Just the that analyzer, that just sit in that sort of that masculine. And again, neither's good or bad. It's like, even within masculine and feminine energy, we have healthy masculine energy and unhealthy masculine energy, healthy feminine energy, unhealthy feminine energy. So it's, just tapping into those healthy and more developed aspects of both. Because if there's no structure to the week, then that flow, it's going to get pretty wishy-washy, and chaotic pretty quickly if there's no structure at all. So it's understanding how they're both on the same team and having the two coexist. And I feel like that masculine and feminine dynamic, it's good. It's a really good framework to learn because we can separate things, and that makes it simpler for us to understand. And therefore, okay, I'm going to go and sit in my feminine more. Okay, I'm going to sit in my masculine more. But can you have the both coexisting at once? Can you be like fully present but with your heart open? Because that is still separation, which is still a bit of an illusion. Do you know what I mean? So it's a really good place to start and to learn. And what has been my sort of edge recently is like, can the two coexist? Do you know what I mean? Can the two dance like from moment to moment? And that's definitely easier said than done. But it's that's when I've been experiencing my most flow, my most fulfillment, my most creativity, it's been that. It's been because more often than not, old school, it's like the man sits in the masculine, and then we need the female to sit in the feminine, and then that, because we're lacking that. Whereas we're coming into the state where we can have wholeness within ourselves, and we can have that inner union of our masculine and our feminine. And then the more work we start to do, we can start to have the two like coexist rather than be polarizing into one, and have the choice, the range, like the emotional agility to be like, okay, my situation right now is requiring more of my masculine energy, so I can come into that. And then, you might be getting home and wanting to connect with your partner, so you might need to soften and open more. And so it's about developing that and recognizing it can coexist, or you might need to go more towards one end of the spectrum. But I think that there's not a lot of as much talk about that coexisting as I think there needs to be, because otherwise, again, it's a label and it's a box. And then we can overcook it. Am I masculine or my feminine? Blah, blah, blah. And so, I am. And so creating space for that.
Yes. And that's the wholeness that's where the wholeness comes from, and knowing when to use which aspect in a way. And that's where I think we're going towards as human beings, and in the next level of, self-love and potency and power is bringing those two things together, because there has been a lot of, opposites before, black and white and this and that and same thing. And so I think now we're coming into this approach of how can we bring both together. And, before we wrap up, I just wanted to, ask you this question is, if you were completely present right now, what is, a realization that maybe you might be getting right now, or you've had recently, that you could deliver to the audience as a message that could be supportive to their lives?
My biggest one is checking in with where I'm trying to make something or someone that they're not. So especially more that you do the work, quote unquote, this will be especially important for people that have been doing the personal development and doing the thing. You can forget that you've still got those blind spots. And so I've just had some reminders recently, like, oh, wow, I'm wanting that person to be more like this, and then that would make my life easier. Or I'm wanting this situation to be more like this, rather than looking at it for the mirror that it is, and looking at it, what is it reflecting back in me, and taking my power back. Because that is something that when I first came across that concept and started implementing it, changed my life forever. That reflection, triggers and reflections, that has propped up again for me recently. And so, that's what's really true and present for me right now.
Man, that was so important for me to hear personally, actually, because, I think when you get deeper in the work and you see more of the light, you kind of want the light to be everywhere, and not realizing that the lessons are from the mirrors. And I've seen this in my life. It recently has been like my family life. I want my mum to be like this, or my father to be like this, or this business situation to go like this. And really just kind of wanting to force everything to be just like I am, so I can be in this rainbow, like in a harmonious situation constantly, my positive emotion bubble all the time. I think that's such an important message for the people that are listening, and me personally. I just want to say thank you, man. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. There were so many nuggets in this podcast, like really and truly, there was so much, so many things to learn from you, Tully, and the wisdom that you have, and the wisdom that comes through you. It was an important conversation, and I honor you for that, man. I honor you for who you are as a person, and the message you're delivering in the world, and someone that is always striving to look deeper into himself. And it's great to have champions like you to be embodying the things you speak about, and knowing that there is messy sometimes, and knowing that you're not perfect at the same time, and that things happen, and being real. I think conscious community, I think realness, sometimes people can get too far into the spiritual plane, and it's up to you where you want to be in that journey. But I love the realness that you come with it, as in that you can be a relatable guy, where people can come and see you and come into your space, and they're seeing like, okay, you connected with me as a human being, and then you have all this wisdom to deliver. It adds more potency from how I see it. So thank you so much, brother. And how can people find you, and like, what are you up to with the world? Because I know firsthand that working with you, like, people could gain so much from working with you on a one-to-one level. Like seriously, that I would recommend working with Tully if you get a chance. And I think a lot of people in relationships don't know where to start when it comes to bringing more harmony into a relationship, and understanding the patterns that make a good relationship. And so you and Caitlin have done the work, and I know you've done the work heavy. So I recommend, if you're looking for someone, a couple or a partnership to support you in your relationship, then look no further than Tully and Caitlin, and you can find them on the Living in Love Instagram page. But I'll let you talk about the stuff that's going on and where they can find you at the same time.
Beautiful. Thanks, man. I really received that acknowledgement, and just reflect it straight back at you, dude. Like, I really love the way you show up, and just the way that you've just pulled the trigger and started this podcast and are starting to get these messages out there, man. You're, a man of action. So it's been an honor, and it's been fun to have a chat with you, dude. So thank you. So just, you can find me on Instagram. It's just at Tully O'Connor. And then our Living in Love is livingin.love. And I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. I do speaking and workshops, but I'm over in Western Australia. So depending on where your audience is tuning in from. And I'm putting together, so by the time this podcast goes live, it'll probably be up and out, a program for men. So it'll be a 12-week program for men, just to work through all of this, a lot of the stuff we've spoken about. And it's all around just sort of reclaiming our personal power. So we dive into relationship and purpose, but it's really the key stuff around accessing our full potential and power. I'm really excited to be bringing that to life. So that'll be floating around, but come hang out on Instagram, and it'll be tullyo'connor.co is my website. So that's pretty much it, my man.
Once again, man, thank you so much for being on the Conscious Movement podcast.
Much love, dude. I'll chat to you soon.